Hey everybody, welcome back to 2 Pixels Off with myself, Mike Janda, and my cohort in crime, Mr.
Brad Hussey.
That's where you say your name. We didn't plan anything for the start of this podcast.
Off the cuff.
Off the cuff, just letting you introduce yourself. Brad Hussey, Huss Dog, as we came to know him last week on 2 Pixels Off. We are back.
Welcome to 2 Pixels Off, a podcast for creative entrepreneurs.
Hey, thank you everybody who has given us some feedback on the show. We just launched. We put 2 episodes out last week. This is actually episode 5 that we're recording right now. So we have 2 more coming before you'll hear this one. But Brad and I are trying to get a little ahead, and we've had great feedback, and we love that kind of feedback. And if you are liking or loving the show, please drop a review in your favorite podcast platform, because it makes a huge difference to the ability for this podcast to get out and found by other people. So we appreciate that so much. The next thing, just want to shout out our sponsor, Wix Studio. By the way, Brad, I think it was on yours or maybe it was a Wix Studio post, but they talked about mouse tracking parallax animation that they have in their platform now. And it was super cool because it was the mouse moving around the screen and the eyeballs following it all over the screen. And I thought, man, it just keeps coming out with more new features that can help you make engaging, interactive, interesting websites. Did you see that little post? I'm sure you're in the weeds of that a bit more than I am.
Yeah, I did. I even made a video on the mouse parallax effect and the mouse effects, because you could do lots of different custom effects with the mouse. So creating just like I like to call them delightful interactions on your websites. Like, they're not necessary, but doing these little things, like maybe it's an image or a graphic tracks your mouse or responds to how you're interacting with the website or the web app. And it just creates a bit of a delight factor. And you're right, they're always pushing out these new features that are always welcome. They even did their Wix Open Studio event, which is where they kind of like announce big features, big changes, new features, but also they listen a lot to user feedback. So if there's like a user complaining about a feature, or I wish they could do this, or this is the one thing that's stopping me from joining or trying it out, and then that's where they will announce that stuff. So they just recently did that, and there's been a lot of huge drops in that event that I was like super pumped about as well.
It is. It's a great platform. They're always coming out with new things, and they're devoted to making it a platform that outperforms the competition in feature set and ease of use and things. Go back in time. We could go on a tangent about web design, but go back in time, and having something track the mouse even 10 years ago was problematic. You couldn't just be a non-designer and do that, and you can now inside of Wix Studio.
100%.
Okay, today we will be talking about how to handle sales objections. Your client says no. Why did they say no, and what are you going to do about it? We're going to talk about that in detail inside of 2 Pixels Off today. Brad, why don't we kick off with a little bit of value on what are the primary reasons that someone objects to saying yes when you're bidding or pitching creative services to them? What's one of the big objections that you see in your career?
The biggest one's going to be the price, the cost of your offer, your proposal, or maybe you ballparked a figure, or you mentioned something in a sales call. The price is a huge hang up.
Yeah. I would say that 90% of the time when the client says no, it's related to price. That's the thing. It's not all the time. Okay, maybe it's 80% of the time. 80% of the time it's price. There are a couple other reasons. I'll give you another one that I think happens to people, where the client is concerned that the quality of the work is not going to meet their expectations. So they choose someone else who they trust a little more to deliver the quality that they expect, or that they feel like their brand or marketing needs. What's another one, Brad?
A big one, the quality one I find interesting when we dig into that, because that's a pretty bit of a nuanced one. I don't hear that one a lot, but when you do, it's kind of a painful one to hear, but we'll dig into that afterwards.
I think clients don't tell you when it's quality. I think it's just like they get 3 bids, and if they're concerned about your quality, it's not like they come out and tell you, oh, your work just wasn't as good as the next person. But sometimes you can find out who they went with, and then you can see the work quality of them and realize that maybe you're falling short in that quality metric.
Yep.
Okay, what was another one?
The next one I would say is your ability to turn it around in time. So your timeline, and if you won't be able to get the project done based on a certain deadline requirement.
Yeah. Or if they're concerned that you can't hit that deadline requirement. Like, you can either tell them that, hey, I can't get this to you by Monday, and then they choose someone else.
Yeah.
Or they just think there's no way that guy's going to be able to get it done in the next 3 weeks when we need it. They don't trust your efficiency, and they go with somebody who maybe exuded a little more confidence in their ability to crank it out and get it done in time. So I think that exists too. I agree with you. The last one, and maybe it's not the last one, but it's the last one on my list, is customer experience. They feel like working with you is not going to be as pleasant as working with someone else. They have these sales meetings, these conversations with a few different choices, and whatever you did or did not do made them feel like you're a little disorganized, your communication wasn't spot on, they didn't really understand what you're talking about, you used too big of words. They feel like you're just getting into some situation where it's not going to be an enjoyable experience. And I think clients oftentimes aren't going to tell you that that's the reason either, but you can safely assume that it is on the percentage scale of why someone chose to work with someone else instead of you. Yeah. Any others that you see that of a common objection?
Well, it really depends on if it's a current client and you're pitching them on a new offer or, an ongoing engagement of sorts, or if it's literally a sales call with a lead that hasn't worked with you before. A lot of the time, they will throw a smoke screen at you, which is price. But another one that I will hear is they'll say something like, let me talk to my whoever the decision maker would be. Could be wife, could be husband, could be business partner, could be, manager or whatever it is. It's essentially a smokescreen to say, I'm not the decision maker, or I don't want you to think that I'm the decision maker. And I need to talk to them first. I need to think about it. And that's usually a common one because they're trying to be polite and trying to distance themselves. And it all comes down to a lack of trust in your ability. I think all of them fall into the category of they don't trust what you're offering is worth the price that you're pitching it at.
Yeah. I think that's interesting, the decision maker thing. We should talk about that at some point, like gatekeeper versus manager versus decision maker versus influencer in the decision, and what these different roles are, because I think it's helpful to understand that in business. I do think that's a smokescreen. Like they want to let you down easy. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna show it to Sally, and Sally's actually gonna make the final decision. She's the one who's gonna decide, and then they come back to you and say, well, Sally chose someone else. Really, there's some objection inside of there, either with your contact who you're pitching with, or with Sally, and you may not know what it is. It's this kind of hidden, easy, let you down easy way to brush you off. And anyway, brush you off. Okay, let me just interject this. Where do these, I say so many of these little phrases like this that now in the politically correct world that we live in, I hear it and then I'm like, wait a second. Is that offensive to somebody?
Was that mean?
Certainly somebody somewhere is going to be offended because I'm using some phrase that stemmed from something offensive.
100%. You'll say something by accident at some point for sure.
Yeah. So brush you off. I don't know. If that offends anybody, let me know in the comments. Or don't. Just actually don't let me know. Just
Yeah.
I'll be careful. Anyway, so I think that smokescreen thing is an interesting thing. Okay, so we have 4.5 different reasons. You got price, you've got the customer experience. They might have a concern about quality. They might have a concern that you can't hit a timeline, and they may just brush you off and not tell you or blame it on a decision maker, or maybe you're not even selling to the right person, which is what usually happens in that situation.
But
let's dig deep.
That.
Yeah, let's dig deep on each of these. And let's start with the biggest one of all, that is, I think, that 80% of the reason that they choose someone else is because of price. What do we do when the client says, "Oh, we went with someone cheaper"? What did we do wrong? Let's talk about that first. What did you do wrong during that sales process?
Well, I guess it depends on if in this scenario, are you getting feedback from somebody, a lost deal, and they say we went with somebody cheaper, and you respond to that? Or are you on a sales call and you offered them your solution and they say that price is too high for us? Because I think there's two different approaches. I mean, they're both unique. They're both scenarios that you have to be able to account for, but one is different from the other. One, you could potentially get the deal, and one is, how do I improve this?
Yeah. So let's talk about the one where they think, so option number one is you're too expensive. We went with someone cheaper.
Okay.
How do we refute that? How do we refute that? How do we save ourselves the opportunity? Or the client, maybe in the sales conversation, says, well, I don't know, they're kind of overlapping, but we got 3 bids. You're the highest of those 3 bids. We're looking at these less expensive options. So it's a pre-decision. You still have a chance to save this project if you can persuade them to spend more to use you instead of the other 2 cheaper options.
Okay.
What do you do?
What do you do? Well, what most freelancers, maybe even junior agencies, would do is to probably just lower their price and kind of cave.
Crater their price.
Yeah. And that's not, like, don't do that if you can help it, because there are other ways to handle this that are much more professional and maintain your integrity. And also, really, the problem here is not that your price is too expensive, barring you just charging some outlandishly crazy price just because you feel like you're supposed to. No, like you usually are charging a higher price because the value is there and it's worth it and more. Whereas the cheaper options are, maybe they fit a certain budget for various reasons, or they don't have a bigger team, or they don't have as good skill, or their offer and their solutions aren't as sound. Yeah. But so really what it comes to is, first of all, understanding them. Like if a person feels understood and they say, you're the highest of the 3, to be honest, Mike, I want to be really clear here. I like you and your solution looks interesting to me, but it's the highest by a long shot of the 3 we're looking at. So, I would say understand that, show some sort of empathy and go like, look, I get it. We're not cheap. And that's for a reason. Can I explain to you why I think what we're offering is not only worth that, but more? And then from that, you could either, so you take a gentle approach here, but don't talk down to them. They call it, mansplaining, or just whatever the term you want to use.
Mansplaining. Is that offensive? Is that, it's got to be offensive to somebody. Go back.
Yeah, of course. But it's like, you just want to.
I'm offended. I'm offended.
I hurt your feelings, Mike.
It's okay. I'll get over it. I work on it.
You want to be able to be empathetic and control the conversation, but like put yourself in a position of like, hey, like, look, you get to choose whoever you want, and I respect that, and it's totally up to you. And I understand, we're the most expensive. If I'm looking at an option and it's this much cheaper, and we got this option up here, either that price is way too high, or they've got something that I'm not quite seeing. And I'd like to argue that I think we've got something that maybe I didn't do a good enough job of explaining. So don't blame them, say, you're not seeing how good I am, because then they're like, well, screw you.
Yeah.
Go, you know what? I think I made a mistake. I don't think I explained to you why it's that.
Yeah.
And you look like you've got your gut reaction there.
I got a thing to say, but you can keep going. I'm not gonna interrupt. If you got more.
Okay. You want to do this carefully here. Don't offload, here's our expenses, here's our team, we have a huge operating budget, all blah, blah, blah. I don't care. I literally don't care about your business and your agency. I care that I have my business and I don't think I have the budget for that when I'm trying to get this. So really it's not about like, hey, look, I could go on for days and days about the cost of our team or blah, 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 blah. The reality is we pride ourselves in the best possible solutions and work. We only do this. So if you're offering a specific type of site, let's say website or plan or marketing to your client, I say, we only do this. And we dedicate and invest a lot of time, money, energy, resources into becoming the best. So our solutions are sound, they're quality. We have a strong, consistent team. They're going to be here 6 months down the line, 5 years down the line. Like, this is what we do, and we do it best. And that's not cheap to make the best solution possible. So I can't reasonably bring that price down, unfortunately. And I understand if that's a deal breaker for you, but give me a moment here and maybe we can make this a deal worth having for you. And so then you can go into either adding more value to the offer or highlighting the value you already have in the offer to show them that it is in fact worth it. Or saying, what if you go these other solutions and maybe they're not getting you where you need it to be? Is that going to be a deal breaker for you? And you spend the lower amount, but you still don't get there. And then now you have to go and buy it again from somebody better, or you kind of do it right the first time with a near guarantee of it being exactly what you need and more. Plus you're taken care of. Plus you got that. Like, you could go into showing this is why it's this, and it's totally up to you. What do you think?
I think you hit a billion good points in your message there. Not a billion. Let's say 7.
Like 7.
You hit seven. You hit 7 good points. I was rounding up. You hit 7 good points in your message there. And it all kind of distills down to this apples to apples comparison between you and the cheaper options, and highlighting the reasons that you are a better choice at a higher price than using the lower price options. We talked about this in the last episode, I think, of this podcast on why people buy, and they will spend more for these things, better quality. They'll spend more for better customer experience. They'll spend more for a faster turnaround time, better results, better return on investment. They'll spend more for those things. So what I would do in this situation where the client says, wow, we got 3 bids and you're the most expensive by far, so we're looking more closely at these other 2 that are cheaper, my response would be, you usually get what you pay for. And I would make sure that when you're comparing our price and deliverables to the competing bids, that they are an apples to apples comparison. Are they giving you the same quantity of stuff that we are? We have in here, we're building a 10-page website. We go through the wireframe process and information architecture, and we're going to add in all the little bells and whistles, and you're going to be able to manage it on the back end and blah, blah, blah. And you highlight that to them. Make sure that they have that scoped the same way that we do inside of their presentation. That's step number 1. The next one is, like Brad, you were just saying, are they going to deliver the same results to you? We have a history of doing this exact thing for clients in your exact niche, your exact industry, and we're focused on website solutions. That is what we specialize in. Now, make sure that you're not comparing our price of specialization and expertise in your industry and in the deliverable with someone who's a generalist or not as seasoned and experienced as we are. And then ultimately, are they going to generate the same results that we do? And let me show you 3 of our last projects and what the results were for our clients. We did this website redesign and it generated 20% more sales in the first month. We did this website redesign and here's a testimonial from that client. And we did this website redesign and over the course of that first year, they had X growth in sales through their website. Are the competing bids? Yes, they may be cheaper, but do they show that they have a track record of delivering results like we do? And when you're going to make that comparison, just make sure you're making it accurately and comparing apples to apples.
Yep, exactly. I think that also in that comparing to apples, you might also show that the scope is just completely different, meaning you have let's even call it a broader scope of knowledge and experience where you say like, look, I understand why, say, let's call it a $50,000 proposal on our end, the high end. Like, I understand that you've probably got a freelancer on the hook for about 15 grand. And I'm not going to lie, that freelancer's probably pretty excited. 15 grand's a big deal for a freelancer. I was a freelancer once and getting those projects like this, it's pretty great. But what I can also tell you from that experience is that freelancer or anyone in that range is not quite seeing through the fog of war, let's say, that we have had that experience. We know what's on the other side of that situation or that issue or that program or that requirement that we're needing. And so we've scoped out a much more comprehensive offer that's going to take care of all the things that somebody earlier in the stage won't see. And I think in this scenario, it's crucial that that's taken care of for the nature of your project. You've got e-commerce with taxes and, international shipping and a lot of stuff that needs to be understood. And we're in position to handle that. In fact, we have a team that specializes in that part so that we don't mess those parts up and cost you more down the line. I understand that budget's nice, but it's not accounting for A, B, C, and D, all with $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000 price tags or potential costs down the line. Mm-hmm. We've taken care of that, and there's no guesswork. What we are giving you is all of it, mm-hmm. and you don't have to worry.
Yeah, I think that's great. And while you were talking, Brad, I think I want to just reiterate to everybody listening that this is the conversation. If you're the high bid, it's not if you're the freelancer with the 15 grand bid, then you're the one potentially getting chosen and your whole sales conversation is the exact opposite. It's like, why would you ever choose to work with the agency and spend more when we can do it for less? And your whole pitch is the exact opposite of what we're talking about. And that does exist in the world. But this is the mindset that you were the one selected out because your price was too high. Okay, Brad, so this apples to apples comparison, and if the client comes to you during that and then says, that's all good and well, Brad, I know you'll get results, and I know you're still talented and you got the expertise, there's no doubt about it, but we just don't have the budget for it. It's not that we don't see the value in you, it's just we don't have the budget to work with you, so we have to choose somebody cheaper. What do you respond to that, Brad? Well, Mr. Smarty Pants, Brad.
Well, I think at all points you have to fully be okay with maybe this is not the right lead for you. And I think a healthy dose of that reality, detaching yourself from the outcome, let's say, of like, do I land this client or not, actually puts you in a really advantageous psychological position. There's probably some sort of psychology behind it, I'm sure. But I know the feeling of it. When you feel like you need that client, whether you really do or not, versus when you're like, I don't need this client. Sure, it'd be great. That $50,000 project would be amazing. But if you can detach from that, you're actually in a much better position, and you kind of respond much more calm. You're more sound. You're collected. There's no like desperation, and the clients or the leads can really pick up on that in little subtle things that you say or do, or okay, but what about this or this stuff that they pick up on? I don't know exactly what that is, but it's really there and you can feel it.
Yeah, it is really there.
You know?
Yeah.
So detaching from that outcome, just like if you can do that, whether or not you really need the project, just you'll do so much better. So that's the first part. But
so that's healthy. But what if you really do need the project? What if you really are desperate and you sent your bid in and it was 50 grand and the other competing bids were half of you and you really do want it? Like, how do you recover from giving them this big price and being double the other people? What do you do? And they say, I just don't have the budget. I'd love to work with you, man, but I just don't have the budget.
Well, my gut response to that is too bad, so sad.
Oh, it is. You're like, screw you, man. Screw you, freelancers. You blew it.
Well, it's like if you really need it.
Yeah.
Well, if you're like really desperate for that, I understand. And like, I get that. But in this sort of situation, your feelings about being desperate for winning that bid or not, like the client shouldn't hire you because they pity your situation. Like the client shouldn't have to be concerned about that. So I think your job, even if you do need it, genuinely, you're like, this 50 grand is kind of a make or break for the business this month. Then, well, first of all, don't show that, for goodness sake. Don't show that because that's not going to work for you. I promise. Swallow that, put that away, you know, whatever you need to do to put that away, put that aside and go, all right, okay, you know what, Mike, I'd really like to work with you on this. And I totally understand. Let's see if we could would you be willing for us to find a better solution that might fit more within your budget?
This is the one right here.
Yeah. And then they go, ooh, because then what happened is you showed that you're reasonable and you're willing to be flexible. You've already went out the gate to show that you're kind of the premium, maybe higher end solution. You can think further out. You got a better scope. You got better resources or experience. And then that high end offer or agency was like, I'd like to work with you on this. I'm really excited about this project and I really would like to help you out with it. Mm-hmm. Would you be willing for me to see if we can come up with something that could fit more within that budget? Mm-hmm. And then they're most likely going to say, yeah, I'm curious. Like I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Yeah.
Now,
that's the approach. Did you want to continue or you want me to?
No, I'm curious what I'll let you launch off that one because I feel like you got some experience in that too.
Yeah, that's the approach that I love with this. The client is like, sorry, I know you're so great, but we just don't have the money. And you respond by saying, okay, now that we know what money you do have, now that we gave you a price and you say it's too high, what's the number that you need to be at? What's your budget number? And then they say you bid the 50 and they're like, we really only have 25 grand to do this one. Or you bid 5 grand and they really only have 1,500 to do this. Let's put it back down to reality, planet Earth for some of the people listening. You bid it at 5 grand because you saw somewhere on the internet that you needed to jack up your prices. And then the client's like, no, sorry, I really only have 1,500. What do? You come to them and say, you know what? This is a great opportunity for us to craft a solution that fits your budget. Now that we know a number, let's craft a solution that fits your budget. And what we like to do in this situation is break a project into a minimum viable product versus the dream product. And we can go in and say, let's go in and strategize a solution that gives you what you need to get launched right now. And then we'll do the rest of it in a phase 2 in a couple months when you have more revenue coming in, or you have another seed round of investment, or you save up a little bit more money. We can do it in a phase 2. Would you be open to us refining this scope and then breaking it into 2 separate projects, a starter project now, and then the bigger project later?
Yeah.
And that usually works with a situation like this. If the client is interested in working with you, they'll usually say, okay, I'd be interested in that. Let's take a look at that.
Yeah, 100%. And if they don't, like if they're throwing, like if they're being passive aggressive or throwing up smoke screens, and despite your best efforts to objection handle or to be willing to work on, say, scope or adding value to justify the high price. And you're trying all these techniques because that's really what it is they have a lack of trust that what you're offering is worth the price, whether or not they can afford it.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to bring them closer to trusting that yours is the right solution, that it's worth the price, that it's worth the effort and the risk, that you're reducing risk is what you're doing. So if you're saying, well, here's why it's so expensive, and here's why that's a good thing, and here's what you could potentially look for on the other end in terms of return on investment. And that could be in time savings, it could be in money savings, it could be in money made, it can be in a number of factors. Relief, your team is relieved from whatever it is. There's lots of factors. So you do that. And let's say that's not quite working. And okay, what if, you train them on why it's valuable and that's not working? And what if you go, all right, well, what if we said we could work together on something to get it closer to the price range? And we could kind of find something that's kind of meticulously crafted together to closer to the range. And then if even after that, they're unwilling, well, they're just not a good fit. They just don't like you, or they don't want to work with you, or they just fundamentally don't trust you.
Yeah.
Or and that's fine. In fact, that's a good thing. Let that person go politely, wish them all the best, and say, reach out if you got any questions, or, don't cut it off and burn a bridge. But you probably don't want to work with that person anyway, because maybe they were going to be more difficult than they were worth, and it's just not the right fit. And you could learn from that as well.
Yeah, there's a certain point when you say, okay, well, forget it. I don't even want this thing anymore. And so I think you go into it, they say it's too expensive. You go into it with these mindsets of, okay, well, let's show their potential return on investment. They're not understanding the level of effort that we're going to put into this, or they're comparing apples to oranges. We're the apple and the other cheaper bids are oranges, and it's really not compatible. And you can go and try to discuss these things, but there is a point when the client will be like, well, okay, yeah, I'll see your cheaper bid for 2 different projects, but we really want to get it all done now. We're just going to go with the cheaper option. And if that's the case, then let them go. And I always try to comfort myself by thinking, all right, fine. You can go be a miserable client to my biggest competing agency out there. You can go ruin their life instead of mine. So fine, so be it.
Yeah,
I would comfort
you're going to go slow them down. I can go sprint and get ahead.
Yeah. And then I get really competitive. Then I'm like, all right, well, screw you. You don't want to work with me? I'm going to go find a better client than you. That's what I start thinking in my head. These things comfort me. They comfort me.
There's nothing wrong with a healthy dose of competition, or a little bit of I'm gonna do this in spite of that. It's if it's done right, if it's done in a healthy way, I think that could be fun.
Yeah. Okay, so price, that is objection number 1. We gave you some ideas and some ways that those conversations can go. Hopefully you pulled a couple little nuggets out of there. The one that I think is really strong is that apples to apples. Make sure that they're comparing the same thing, what the cheaper bid is giving them to what you're giving them. Make sure that that's accurate. The next thing on this list that we talked about, Brad, was quality. They're concerned that the work that you do is not going to be as good. And so they're going to choose somebody else. And again, a lot of times they're not going to tell you that this is the reason, but you can sniff it out in a conversation if you start talking to them and you ask them, okay, well, how was our price? And they say, oh, your price was fine. Price was fine. It was in harmony with the other bids. Okay, well, was it something else that made you choose the other thing? You can start to sniff it out. They may say something like, well, we just thought that they could deliver better results, or we just thought that they had some work that was really similar to the thing that we're going to do, or they had this one case study that was really a match to what we want to do on this. So we just felt a little more confident that they were going to be able to hit it better. So we went with them. You can pull it out of a client, but what do you do, Brad, in this situation when they think Brad's quality is not as good as Sally's quality, so I'm going to choose Sally? How do you respond to that?
Oh, that's a humbling one, right? Because if they feel, maybe it's not objectively relative to them, but if they feel like your quality of work is just not comparable to the other ones, well, maybe it's not. Like maybe it doesn't look very good. Maybe you did a bad job of curating your portfolio or your case study, or even if it's your Instagram and that's how they found you, and you're not showing your show reel of portfolio pieces. If you're showing like work that's not so good, I mean, like they're going to be like, I like how this one looks better, and this doesn't look as good, So if they dance around that and say it in so many words, part of it is like, well, go get better at it. Find a better designer on your team, or if you're the designer and you're a solo agency operator, then get better at design, or in the very least, get better at showing off the best parts of your design to show, that you are in fact skilled. The craft that you offer is quality. And so that's a first part, now, honestly, like that to me is a big part of it. Now, how do you handle that objection? Well, maybe there's other leverage points that you can pull in terms of maybe the price, the customer experience, or, you could say, we're working on a project right now, and I actually think that you'll really like it. This is just me, just off the top of my head. Maybe you've got something better down the line and you're working on some, high fidelity mockups right now. You say, I'd like to show you that, see what it is that we're doing. And I think that you'd be really impressed. And maybe you can see the level of detail in the work that we provide and the quality. And I think you'll appreciate that. And then maybe that's just, their trust in you, and you reduce that risk by showing, our quality is there, and you need to do a better job of showing that and highlighting it. And, if you're on the spot to try and show that your quality is there, if it is there, in fact, and they're just misunderstanding, well, then it's your job to make sure that they see that, that they understand it. But if it's not there, a little piece of humble pie is served up for you to go and get better.
Yeah. I think you use the word portfolio in the start of your message there. I think that's the core of it. If you have the ability to do the quality, then they haven't seen it yet. And maybe it's because you did not pull out certain case studies in your pitch to show them similar work, or your portfolio in general is just random and not curated for them. Or you're not showing your best work at all. Like you've got that project that isn't even turned into a case study yet, and you have that sitting there, and you can show it to them with this kind of last ditch effort to prove that you can do the quality itself. This one's a tough one to recover from, because if you get to this situation where you've had those initial sales conversations and they still feel like your quality is not going to be sufficient in comparison to somebody else, you do have to eat a little humble pie on that. You should show it in advance. Now, if you go back, Brad, to last conversation, we were talking about why people choose. If somebody says, if they think that your quality is not as good as someone else, you have other levers to pull. This is the lever of, okay, yeah, they can do better quality than us, but we are cheaper than them. They can do better quality than us, but you're going to have a better customer experience working with us. They can do better quality, but we're going to be able to deliver it by this Friday. And I don't know if they're going to be able to hit that deadline because they're a much bigger beast that they're wrangling inside of their business compared to me as a nimble freelancer. So you look for these other levers to pull in this sales dynamic where you're losing in one category, so you're going to try and win in other categories.
Yep. Exactly. You have to know your strengths and your weaknesses, and the strengths and weaknesses of your competitors, and the potential people who you're being kind of pitted up against, and to go like, look, I can't beat, Goliath at Goliath's game.
Yeah.
But I can maybe in this way and this way and maybe this way. And if I stack those, the odds are back in my favor. And now I think we're competing again. So you can't go, well, our quality is the best and it is so good, and you're just not seeing it. You're like, well, that's pathetic and that's not going to work. But you go, okay, first of all, show them the quality is there. If it is there, make sure that you've done a good job of explaining it. Oh, my apologies.
Yeah.
You know what? You didn't see the latest thing. I need you to see this, but let me tell you, the nimbleness, the customer experience, the speed. You go like, how would you like this done by Friday?
Yeah.
I can tell you that's not going to happen with an agency. I've worked in agencies and they are not fast. They're expensive for a reason. So we'll get this done by Friday. How's that sound?
Yeah.
You're like, we're ready. Like and then they go, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay. Well, what about this? Then you can get back on the field,
Yeah. Did you know who your competitors were on projects when you bid projects?
A lot of the time it's
Did you know?
ever. One time I knew, actually one time I did know for sure. I did a little bit of investigating. So person I worked with at an agency, I went freelance. He moved to another agency. I might have told the story on a previous episode, but real quick, I sent a bid and he's like, Brad, at least double that. You're bidding against an agency in the same building as us. And they're bidding like $50,000, $60,000. So they're going to laugh your $5,000 bid out of the room. So I was like, well, I know where their office is. Who's the agency? So I Googled it and I looked at them. I looked at their work. I found out who they were. They were like a web development, like a software and studio. Like they weren't even like a web design, web development. So I was like, oh, wow. Like they're not even, so they're just like providing software solutions and then they're bidding on a web design project. Nah, I got this. So I'm going to add that, double that price up. And so I kind of knew, and I was like, they're expensive just because they got 3 engineers building a WordPress site. Like I got this one. So that time I knew. Other times you just know, sometimes it's a bigger agency. They got more experience. They got better, branding or networking, there's a number of factors, but a lot of the time it's, you don't know. And you just have to kind of create personas of, who they could be.
I love that. Create personas of who you think that you're bidding against, and then understand their strengths and weaknesses and position your strengths against their weaknesses and try and win that way. I do think you can create personas and understand that. I knew a lot of times who we were bidding against. I knew in my local market, I knew all the other agency owners in my local market. They were all friends of mine because I would take them to lunch and get to know them. What is it? Sun Tzu, keep your friends close and your enemies closer or something like that. The Art of War. Anyway, I don't know if that's even Sun Tzu, but it sounds like it could be. So I knew those guys and girls that were in the local market that I was competing against a lot of times. And I could safely assume that they were brought in to pitch on certain projects because of the size of the client in comparison to the amount of people in the area that could serve a client at that level. And then even on the international stuff and the Hollywood stuff, I knew some of the other agencies that they were working with. I didn't know the people at those agencies like I did the local ones, but I knew who they were, and they were my nemesis, man. I was so motivated by competition. They probably didn't even know who my agency was, but I was like, ooh, I know them. I didn't want to take them down, but I wanted to win.
If they don't know who you are, like that's an advantage for you. You're like a ninja in the dark, like if you know who they are, you're like, I know your moves. I know your org chart. I know your operations. I know your budgets. Like I know this. And they're like, who, I don't know anything about you. You're like, good. I don't want you to. That's an advantage, I like that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. What about spec work? If a client comes to you, you've never done any work before that matches the type of work that they want. They're concerned about your quality, so they're thinking of going with somebody else. Do you ever recommend taking the approach of, okay, well, can you give me a day and let me design something that is the type of work that you're wanting to do now? I'll just make up a generic project and design something that shows our capability to create this thing that you want. Would you be open to delaying your decision for 2 days so that I can come to you with a piece of work like that you can see our skill set? You ever open to that? What are your thoughts on that approach in sales?
Okay, so I can't speak from experience because I could tell you honestly, I've never done that. But I've come across opportunities where it was like, what if you made something for like prove to me, sort of like you're just put in a position that's so disadvantageous, like for you. And the power imbalance, it basically sucks the power out of the room that you have. Like you hold no authority or power in that situation anymore. It's like a vacuum for you as the pilot in the cockpit. It's like you just fully walked out and were like, you know what? Like, so I think you have to be really careful with that, because once you've done it, it's almost like you've taught them who you are and what you're willing to sink to. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's dangerous. That's what I think. I think it's a risky move that could cause more harm to your reputation. Because then when you step out, let's say you then step up to the plate and maybe you got a year later, you gotten better. Your team, you got a good designer on your team now. You won an award maybe, and like you're getting better and better and better. But then like you come into the room with this confidence to that client again, and they're like, "Oh, it's you. You did that like plumber site for free for me that one time, and that we declined because we wanted to see what you do, and then we took your mock-up and gave it to our designer." Like, I think it's just so bad. That's what I think.
Yeah. Okay, so I did it once.
Okay.
And what happened to me, I'm checking to see if this thing's even live. Okay, so I can't tell you what it is.
You go to the Wayback Machine.
I did it during the recession. We were desperate, man. We were like wanting to land work and stuff. And so we did this spec design for a client in attempts to land the work. And we went all out, man, created this little style guide and did all these custom illustrations and little custom mock-up of their site and stuff. And it was like all in it to try and win it. And they didn't go with us. And guess what happened about 6 months later when you looked at their website? Every little recommendation that we put about their brand was implemented on their site. The navigation and things of their website were all implemented. It was the style that we recommended for their little characters and stuff. Freaking just gave it to them because they did exactly what you're saying. We did that spec work. They gave it to an internal designer and said, "Hey, just here, do this."
Yep.
And that was it. We gave it away for free. And it's so frustrating. So you got to really, really be careful on this spec work or designing something to try and sell it to the client. You got to be careful because a lot of times it ends up in this situation where it's just gifted.
Well, it's just like you reveal the end. You give them the dessert, before. I can't think of a good metaphor here, but it's just like you kind of spoil their appetite right from the beginning, and they're like, "Why would I pay for this now?"
Yeah,
like you basically just gave it
for free.
I'm gonna screenshot that, and I can whip that up in Canva by myself.
Yeah, yeah. Or I can just hire somebody off of Fiverr and just give them that little brand guide that you gave them.
Like don't do the spec work. Like charge, even if it's a nominal fee, like 10% of what the budget would have been for a roadmap session or for a creative discovery session, and say, look, we have a roadmap session. It's a 2-hour session, let's call it, or a 1-hour session, whatever your timeline and price is. And we'll walk through a bit of the strategy and kind of plan things out. And, it's not spec work. We're not going to like mock things up, but maybe there's a couple wireframes or examples from past projects so that they can't just swipe something and go, we would do this, and we'd recommend this. And based on your needs here and this, we could do this. And you can kind of show them like, here's what's going to happen. And here's our recommendations, a bit of a diagnostic and an audit and our recommended next steps. Then you can go, well, for that $500 or $1,000 for the session, you could take it and you can walk it right out across the street and go to whoever the heck you want to implement it. But we can also do it for you, and we'll apply that $1,000 towards the project. How's that sound? And they go, ooh, maybe okay. Well, let me think about that.
Yeah, that's good. Kind of takes the risk out of it if they do choose you after that, or they can take that design strategy. You could call it a design strategy or a conceptual design phase or something where you're just doing that concepting work. I like that.
Yeah.
I think that could be effective if you're really in this situation where you really want it and you're being docked for your quality level in the eyes of the client.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next. We have 2 left on this section. If we don't dig into this gatekeeper versus decision maker conversation that we could have, client is concerned about the customer experience. They're like, Brad, you seem like a nice guy, but we're just going to go with the bigger agency because they have an account manager. We feel like it's just got a little more structure. They're going to have a dedicated designer to us. And we feel like that structure of working with the agency is going to be a better experience for us, a better way to work. That's their objection, Brad. What do you say to that? I like this conversation, by the way, that I'm the one telling you, here's the problem, and then putting you on the spot.
Yeah, then I got to figure it out, right?
Yeah,
I like it.
It's so good. We're going to do this in the next topic as well. You get to be all the on the spot responses.
Yeah, when I volunteered for the receiving end of this episode, I didn't realize that.
You did. I said, hey, Brad, do you want to open the show or do you want to open the next one? And you were like, oh, why don't you open this one? Here you are.
You do all the work. I was like, wait a minute. Hold on. I got scammed.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. The customer experience concern. Okay, first of all, you should have a good customer experience. Like, there's no excuse if you're running, whether you're a freelancer or an agency, there's no excuse for you having a bad customer experience.
Okay, what makes a good customer experience then? What are the things? What are like these hot points that would make a good customer experience?
Yeah. Well, every project flows the similar timeline, regardless of team size. You've got your you're courting the client, closing the client, onboarding the client, fulfilling the service for the client, handing it off to the client and offboarding them, and then ongoing communication. Those few steps, however you want to name it, everybody does it. And if you don't do those pieces and you're like, well, part of my job, especially freelancers are guilty of this, is like, well, as long as they land the client, it's just doing the work. You're like, well, actually, like that's like 1/5 of it, doing the work. It's important. If you don't do the work, then obviously the project's null, but there's all the other parts. And so then you sit down for a day and you just map out what would make, once they land the client, what would make a good onboarding? What do they need? What are their common questions? Okay, how can I put that into a systemized flow so that I get the right things, I get the right questions, I get the right questionnaire with all the things. Okay, how do we make it easy for them to book a strategy session to kick off the project so that we are all on the same page? Okay, how do I make sure the service delivery is seamless? Do we do Monday kind of briefing sessions and Friday debriefs? Or is it like a constant asynchronous check-in? Like, figure out the process. And then offboarding, how do you hand it off? Do you send a document? Do you send a handwritten thank you letter at the end of it with a gift? Do you train them? Do you fly in and meet them? Or are they local and you go to their office and train them? What's the flow? And then afterwards, how do you stay in touch? Check in 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, send them an anniversary gift or birthday gift. Like, all of that you can do as a 1-person shop or a 100-person shop. And because there's only going to be 1 or 2 people managing those relations anyway, regardless of team size. So like, map that out. And so if the customer, the potential customer goes through the proposal, and their objection is, I'm concerned, in so many words, these guys over here, like, they got a really, really good customer experience. They got a good reputation on that. So they're not going to tell you your customer experience looks like it's going to suck. They're going to say, these guys over here, like, they got a really good customer experience reputation. And then you go, then you can walk them through how, like, white glove your customer experience is from first point to last point, and how you take good care of that. And then if you've got any testimonials to back that up,
love it,
from a person who's like, Brad made me feel like I had nothing to worry about this entire time. It was like a dream. Screenshot that and send it off into an email or put it into your proposals moving forward to show them, yeah, I got customer experience 5 out of 5 stars.
Yeah.
That's what I would say to that.
I love it. And you hit the points that I would highlight there. The one is this: have organization and structure. Get every little step of your thing mapped out, of your project flow mapped out and detailed, and have it in a one screen that you can show the client. Pull it up on the screen and say, look, here's what you can expect from a project working with our team. First, we're going to have a kickoff meeting. And in that kickoff meeting, we're going to talk about X, Y, and Z. Then we're going to assign the designer to it. And then they're going to work on the internal comps, and we're going to have an internal review. Then we're going to present those first comps to you and get your feedback. And we'll do that in a live conversation Zoom call. And you go down that step by step and walk them through that process so they walk away from this feeling like, wow, these guys are freaking organized, man. This is so good. So that's number one of showing them how good this customer experience is going to be. I also think that there's value in showing them your project management system that you use. If you're using Asana or Teamwork or Basecamp or Monday or ClickUps or whatever you're using, pull it up on the screen and show the client, hey, I just want to show you really quick. This is where we manage all the projects and all the communication. And look, you can see here on this project we're working on right now, here's all the conversation thread with us and the client. We're really responsive on here. We're going to reply quickly to your messages, and everything's going to be archived inside of this project management system for us. And then the third thing, so you show organization, you show a project management system, and then that social proof thing I think is so solid. I mean, you pull up the testimonial from your last client who said, Brad is freaking poops gold, man. He's so great. That's the kind of testimonial you want. If you're not getting testimonials like that, start improving your customer experience and then put them on your website. Maybe not that one. It's a little crass, but that was the first one that popped in my head.
Yeah.
So you can see the real me
Yeah.
Inside here. Anyway, I think that those are the core ways that we can resolve this concern about customer experience. And as we're talking, Brad, I was thinking, all these things you should be resolving before you even get the objection. Like you should be showing the quality in case studies. You should be justifying your price because they can see the level of effort or the potential return on investment working with you versus someone else. Or you should be in your sales process mapping out your organization, your project management system, showing some social proof. Preemptively counter these objections inside of your sales process, and you're going to start seeing more yeses.
Yeah. It's a defensive strategy that I think if you realize that there's patterns and these things will come up, and they often do, and there's always counter moves, to these. That's why, like in any sport or like a martial art, like you can't be caught blindsided by a move that you didn't know was there. Like, I mean,
yeah.
If you didn't know it was coming, then you're going to get caught blindsided, and then you're going to fumble, and you're not going to get it. You're not going to win the match. Let's say close the deal.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're like training and you learn this is what the opponent, let's call them, the client is the opponent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is an offensive strategy that they'll do. And guess what they're going to do? They're going to throw the quality concern at you, but they're not going to say, I think, Mike, your work doesn't look good. They're going to say, we got another person over here and it is really nice. What they're saying is, I looked at your portfolio and I was bored, So what are you going to do when they throw that at you? Are you ready for that? What's your response? How do you handle it? Practice it.
Yeah.
Anticipate it. Make sure your quality's up to snuff. They throw the price at you. You better be ready for those 3 or 4 objections about price. How do you handle it? What do you say? How do you justify it? So see them as these defensive strategies that you can anticipate. And when they throw that at you, they throw that jab at you or the left hook or whatever you want to see it. They do something. You're ready and in position to handle it and gracefully kind of redirect it in the way you want the game to go.
Yeah, really good. The defensive strategy or the preemptive strike, that's what it can be also. It can be you think that they're going to punch you, so you punch them first. If we're using Brad's combative, violent,
really violent,
metaphors,
aggressive metaphors,
you think that this person's going to punch you, so you punch them first when they don't see it coming. That is the offensive way to preemptively strike against these objections. And a lot of times you can solve them before they even happen. I did. In fact, all of these things that we've talked about here today are things that I would mention just in my normal sales flow with a client because I knew that they were potential objections.
Yeah.
All right, we have one more, and we're coming up on time for this episode. One more, which is the timeline concern. They have some concerns that you just can't get it done in time for them. What's your rebuttal to that? How do you try and save that project?
Well, assuming that you can account for, accommodate their timeline. Because if you can't, then okay. Don't take something on that you just can't. It's not going to be worth it. But if you can, and you need to restructure something, or you communicated that poorly, then what you could say is, okay, I understand. It sounds like you need this by this date. And from what I understand, it doesn't seem, you think that we're not going to be able to hit that. Okay. I'm going to help. We're going to figure this out. Tell me, what are your like must-have dates? What are like non-negotiables for you? Give me that schedule. Break it down for me. Help me understand that. Because I think I didn't do my homework here enough to understand that. And they could say, okay, well, this, and you know what, we got a big event happening this day and we really need this done by this, and this, here are key dates and they are non-negotiable. And you go, okay, well, what if I told you that we could make that work? But we're going to need to adjust a couple things. And now that might be, it could be you adjust the price. Maybe it's an urgent a priority. Maybe it's just, you have to charge more because you need to shift a different project, or there's an urgency to it. Or you work with them to say, all right, for us to hit that, and I'm confident we can, we're going to need 3 things from you. I'm just pulling these out of the top of my head here. But it's almost making the client also feel like they're held accountable to ensuring that timeline, which is, in order for us to successfully do this and do it well to our standards, we're going to need this from you by this date. No exceptions. And so we have a questionnaire. It's really easy. Our onboarding form, it gives all your branding, all your messaging, your copy, this. You spend a couple hours, or you get someone from your team to do that, and we are golden. We'll have no problem hitting that first date. And as long as you or someone from your team can meet us on our Monday kickoffs, we'll have it done.
Yeah. I think that's good. I think what you were getting to there is showing them a schedule, show them the realistic schedule that can hit their timeline. The way that I like to push against a client who may have a concern like this is to tell them, I always hit timelines. It's not my agency that is going to miss a timeline. The reason that projects get delayed 99% of the time is because of client feedback, turnaround time. And if we can expedite that with you on this project, we can for sure hit your timeline. Let's do real-time feedback. We'll present the comp. You give us feedback on that call, and that is the feedback. We don't have to wait 24 hours or 48 hours for you to respond to us. And if we can do that and give you a delivery every other day between now and your deadline, we're going to be able to hit it, because that feedback that usually delays projects is happening in real time. The other thing too that I would do in this situation is work backwards off of their deadline and give them the schedule. So you say, what is the drop dead that you need this by? Oh, we need it by 2 weeks from tomorrow. Okay, 2 weeks from tomorrow. Let me give you a schedule working backwards off of that date to show you when the deliverables will be and when the feedback needs to be returned to us. And I'll give it to you by the day and hour for each of those things. And you'll see that we can accommodate this schedule. And when you work backwards off of that and you show them the schedule and they have 2 weeks and you actually only have 4 deliveries during that time and 4 feedback rounds, you have 8 potential touch points with the client, and you have 16 or 15 days to do it, including weekends, but you don't deliver on the weekends, but you put them in that scope so they can see, oh, wow, we got a lot of little buffer time here. We got these 2 days in between every delivery. And then it looks more realistic. A lot of times their concern about a timeline is because they don't understand when these milestones are going to hit. And I think you can structure it so that they can see it and build their confidence in your ability to execute it on that timeline.
Nailed it.
All right. What did we not hit here? Let's talk about this selling to decision maker thing on another one, because that's a big can of worms.
It is.
That we need to dig into.
We don't want to gloss over that one.
Yeah. No, it's a big one. I'm going to put it on our list of stuff. And how do you do it when you don't have the decision maker? But anyway, let's recap this one. We had a handful of things. First, we talked about price objections and how to combat that. Make sure that you're doing apples to apples comparisons between you and someone else, and make sure the client understands the strengths that you have, why it should cost more, because the results are going to get better. What's another recap point from this episode, Brad?
Making sure the quality objection, and they're concerned that, compared to the other people bidding on the project, or maybe not even other people bidding on the project, but other potential service providers have higher quality content or higher quality solutions, whether it is visual or not. They say they're not believing that the quality you're going to provide is as good as the other potential options on the table.
Customer experience. They're concerned that working with you is not going to be a good customer experience. What do you do there? You show them social proof, testimonials from other people. You show them your process for executing on the work in a structured, organized way. You walk them through your project management system. Any of those things can boost their confidence that the customer experience is going to be good.
Yep. And timeline. Getting the project done in the non-negotiable deadline that the client requires, and their trust in whether or not you can do that.
Good. Okay, that is a good recap. Thank you for joining us on 2 Pixels Off in this episode. Fun conversation about sales objections and what do you do in these situations. It's tough. And a lot of times it's just the last ditch effort for you to try and land this thing, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, because if you get 1 out of 20 to say yes when they were thinking to say no, and then that becomes a repeat client, and then a referral to a new client next year, and then a referral to a new client the year after, all of a sudden that one shift from a no to a yes can become a huge source of revenue for your business now and in the future. So it's worth it to understand these objections and try to refute them when they come up in your business. Okay, thank you, Pixels, for joining us on this episode of 2 Pixels Off. And like we said at the start, if you like our podcast, or even if you love it, drop a review on your favorite podcast platform. And one final shout out to Wix Studio for making this podcast possible. And you can check out Wix Studio at wixstudio.com. Super powerful web development platform with no code and lots of features. Okay, thank you so much. Brad, you have any last closing? Why don't you take us out and last goodbye?
You just kind of throwing me out there to try and close it off gracefully.
Yeah.
I'll just say thanks, everybody. We really appreciate you listening, and we will catch you in another episode.